Broadcasting from Detroit Public Television in Michigan, this is Democracy Now!
Let us pick up. Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. Education is the only solution. Education first. Thank you.
Malala Yousafzai becomes the youngest person ever to win a Nobel Peace Prize. She's 17 years old. In 2012, she was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman who boarded her school bus. She survived and continued to campaign for the rights of girls to go to school. She shares the award with Kailash Satyarthi, a leader in the international movement against child slavery and the exploitation of child workers. Yousafzai is a Pakistani Muslim, Satyarthi a Hindu from India. Then, as tens of thousands are expected to converge in Ferguson, Missouri for a weekend of protests demanding justice for Michael Brown, we speak with three of the protest's lead organizers, including St. Louis rapper Tef Poe.
You know, I told a police officer the other day while we were protesting, you have the guns and we don't. So the notion that you are afraid of us when you have all of the weapons in the world is ridiculous. You can bring a tank, you can bring an armored vehicle, you can bring tear gas, smoke bombs, you can bring assault rifles. All I have is this. It makes zero sense.
And here in Detroit, a judge has ruled the city can continue to shut off water for thousands of residents who've fallen behind on payments, saying there's no enforceable right to water. We'll speak with Alice Jennings, lead attorney fighting the water shutoffs for Detroit's most vulnerable families.
Water cut off, you're going to leave that house. If you owe $500 or you owe $2,000, you cannot pay that bill. So you will leave that house if you are renting, and it will present an opportunity, yet another opportunity for the corporations to come in and seize that house and to then use it for their interests.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Pakistani education activist Malala Yousafzai and Indian child rights activist Kailash Satyarthi have jointly won the Nobel Peace Prize. The chair of the Nobel Committee, Thorbjørn Jagland, made the announcement this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided that the Nobel Peace Prize for 2014 is to be awarded to Kailash Satyarthi and Malala Yousafzai for their struggle against suppression of young people and children's right to education. Children must go to school, not be financially exploited.
At age 17, Malala Yousafzai is the youngest person ever to win a Nobel Prize. In 2012, she was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman who boarded her school bus. She survived and continued to campaign for the right of girls to go to school. Kailash Satyarthi, age 60, has been a leader for decades in the international movement against child slavery and the exploitation of child workers. In a statement, the Nobel Committee said it, quote, regards it as an important point for a Hindu and a Muslim, an Indian and a Pakistani, to join in a common struggle for education and against extremism. We'll have more on the Nobel Peace Prize after headlines. Leaders from West African countries ravaged by an outbreak of Ebola have pledged for more international aid. Speaking by video conference at a meeting of the World Bank, Sierra Leone President Ernest Bai Koroma said help was needed on the ground, not just on paper.
The last few weeks have indeed been weeks of massive concerns and commitments to fight the outbreak. However, the general international response has up to this moment been slower than the rate of transmission of the disease.
Liberia has postponed next week's Senate elections over fears they could fuel the virus's spread, and a fourth doctor has died of Ebola there. A round of 100 U.S. Marines have arrived in Liberia, bringing the total number of troops there to 300. U.S.-led warplanes have strengthened their assault on Islamic State militants near the Syrian border town of Kobani. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reports the militants have been shelling a border crossing with Turkey. If Kobani falls, ISIS will control more than half of the Syria-Turkey border. In Yemen, at least 47 people were killed Thursday when a suicide bomber targeted members of the Shiite Houthi rebel group who were gathering for a protest in the capital, Sana'a. It was the deadliest blast to hit the capital in over 2 years. Central African Republic is seeing its worst spate of violence in months. The country's faced a crisis since last year when Muslim Seleki rebels seized power, sparking a backlash from Christian militias. In the past few days, at least 9 people have been killed, including a UN peacekeeper from Pakistan. Pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong have called for a major rally after the government canceled talks planned for today. The protests had previously wound down after tens of thousands flooded the streets to demand free elections in 2017. In a double victory for voting rights in the United States, voter ID laws have been blocked in both Wisconsin and Texas less than a month before the November election. In the Wisconsin case, the Supreme Court granted an emergency appeal to prevent the state from implementing its voter ID law. An estimated 300,000 Wisconsin voters lack adequate ID. Separately, in Texas, a federal judge struck down that state's voter ID law, calling it an unconstitutional poll tax that discriminates against voters of color. Attorney General Greg Abbott, who's running for governor, has vowed to appeal. This week, a nonpartisan congressional study found states that implemented voter ID laws saw a drop in voter turnout that disproportionately kept young people and African Americans from the polls. In the Shaw neighborhood of St. Louis, Missouri, protests continued for a second night over the fatal police shooting of an 18-year-old black man. Police have claimed Vonderett Myers fired at them, but Myers' relatives say he was holding a sandwich which police mistook for a gun. The officer fired 17 shots, hitting Myers 7 or 8 times. The renewed protests come ahead of a weekend of action in the suburb of Ferguson over the police killing of Michael Brown 2 months ago. People from around the country are expected to descend on Ferguson to call for justice and an end to police brutality. Mexican authorities have arrested drug lord Vicente Carrillo, the head of the Juarez cartel, just days after the capture of another drug lord, Hector Beltran Leyva. The arrests come as Mexico faces protests over the disappearance of 43 students near Iguala in Guerrero State. Police are accused of ambushing the students, killing 6 people, and turning survivors over to a drug gang with ties to the city's mayor, who has since fled. On Thursday, the Mexican Attorney General, Jesus Murillo, said 4 more mass graves have been found.
We have 4 new detainees whose identities are being confirmed, which is why I will not give names yet. But the most important is that with this arrests, they were able to take us to a place where we found 4 mass graves, which these detainees said were also where the remains of the murdered students were deposited.
This week, protests against the students' disappearance were held across Mexico and around the world. Protesters have continued to call for the students to be released alive. Former Haitian dictator Jean-Claude Duvalier, known as Baby Doc, will reportedly not be getting a state funeral. Duvalier died Saturday, just months after a Haitian court ruled he could be charged with crimes against humanity. His rule of Haiti from 1971 to 86 was marked by the jailing, torture, and deaths of journalists and political prisoners. Duvalier's attorney said the Haitian government had reversed its decision to give Duvalier a state funeral following protests. Estonia has legalized same-sex unions, becoming the first former Soviet state to do so. A law passed by Parliament grants couples and civil unions rights close to those of married couples. The CEO of Microsoft has sparked controversy by suggesting women should not ask for pay raises. Speaking at a gathering of women in computing, Satya Nadella responded to a question about how he would advise women who are uncomfortable asking for a raise.
It's not really about asking for the raise, but knowing and having faith that the system will actually give you the right raises as you go along. And that, I think, might be one of the additional superpowers that, quite frankly, women who don't ask for a raise have. Because that's good karma. It'll come back. Because somebody's going to know that's the kind of person that I want to trust.
Following an outcry over his remarks, Nadella tweeted that he'd been, quote, inarticulate. Women make up just 17% of Microsoft's technical, engineering, and management staff, roughly equivalent to other big tech firms. Nadella earns an estimated $18 million a year as CEO. Wells Fargo's agreed to pay $5 million to settle claims it discriminated against women who were pregnant or had recently given birth. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development says the company denied home loans to recent mothers or forced them to sacrifice their maternity leave and return to work before it would close on their loans. The settlement is a tiny fraction of Wells Fargo's net income, which was $5.7 billion in the last quarter alone. And workers who clean airplane cabins at New York's LaGuardia Airport have agreed to return to work following a strike over unsafe working conditions. The workers, who are employed by a Delta Airlines contractor, say they've been provided with inadequate protections against feces, vomit, and other bodily fluids, a concern that has strengthened amidst fears of Ebola. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road broadcasting from Detroit, Michigan, from the studios of Detroit Public Television. This morning, it was announced that Pakistani education activist Malala Yousafzai and Indian child rights activist Kailash Satyarthi have jointly won the Nobel Peace Prize. The chair of the Nobel Committee, former Norwegian Prime Minister Thorbjørn Jagland, made the announcement this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided that the Nobel Peace Prize for 2014 is to be awarded to Kailash Satyarthi and Malala Yousafzai for their struggle against suppression of young people and children's right to education. Children must go to school, not be financially exploited.
At age 17, Malala Yousafzai is the youngest person ever to win a Nobel Prize. In 2012, she was shot in the head by a Taliban gunman who boarded her school bus. She survived and continued to campaign for the rights of girls to go to school. Kailash Satyarthi, age 60, has been a leader for decades in the international movement against child slavery and the exploitation of child workers. In a statement, the Nobel Committee said it, quote, regards it as an important point for a Hindu and a Muslim, an Indian and a Pakistani, to join in a common struggle for education and against extremism. Last year, on July 12th, her 16th birthday, Malala Yousafzai appeared at the United Nations and delivered her first public speech since she underwent surgery, saying she was undeterred by the Taliban's efforts to silence her voice. The event marked a global day in her honor. This is an extended excerpt of Malala Yousafzai's address.
Dear friends, on the 9th of October 2012, the Taliban shot me on the left side of my forehead. They shot my friends too. They thought that the bullet would silence us, but they failed. And out of that silence came thousands of voices. The terrorists thought that they would change my aims and stop my ambitions. But nothing changed in my life except this. Weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage was born. ambitions are the same. My hopes are the same. And my dreams are the same. Dear sisters and brothers, I'm not against anyone. Neither am I here to speak in terms of personal revenge against the Taliban or any other terrorist group. I'm here to speak up for the right of education of every child. I want education for the sons and daughters of the Taliban and all the terrorists and extremists. I do not even hate the Talib who shot me. Even if there is a gun in my hand and he stands in front of me, I would not shoot him. This is the compassion that I have learned from Muhammad, the Prophet of Mercy, and Jesus Christ and Lord Buddha. This is the legacy of change that I have inherited from Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. This is the philosophy of non-violence that I have learned from Gandhiji, Bacha Khan, and Mother Teresa. And this is the forgiveness that I have learned from my father and from my mother. And this is what my soul is telling me. Be peaceful and love everyone. Today, I'm focusing on women's rights and girls' education because they're suffering the most. There was a time when women social activists asked men to stand up for their rights, but this time we will do it by ourselves. I'm not telling men to step away from speaking for women's rights. Rather, I'm focusing on women to be independent, to fight for themselves. So, dear sisters and brothers, now it's time to speak up. So today, we call upon the world leaders to change their strategic policies in favor of peace and prosperity. We call upon the world leaders that all the peace deals must protect women's and children's rights. A deal that goes against the rights of women is unacceptable. We call upon all governments to ensure free, compulsory education all over the world for every child. We call upon all the governments to fight against terrorism and violence, to protect children from brutality and harm. We call upon the developed nations to support the expansion of educational opportunities for girls in the developing world. We call upon all the communities to be tolerant, to reject prejudice based on caste, creed, sect, color, religion, or gender, to ensure freedom and equality for women so that they can flourish. We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. We call upon our sisters around the world to be brave, to embrace the strength within themselves and realize their full potential. Dear brothers and sisters, we want schools and education for every child's bright future. We will continue our journey to our destination of peace and education. No one can stop us. We will speak up for our rights, and we will bring change through our voice. We believe in the power and the strength of our words. Our words can change the whole world because we are all together, united for the cause of education. And if we want to achieve our goal, then let us empower ourselves with the weapon of knowledge, and let us shield ourselves with unity and togetherness. Dear brothers and sisters, we must not forget that millions of people are suffering from poverty, injustice, and ignorance. We must not forget that millions of children are out of their schools. We must not forget that our sisters and brothers are waiting for a bright, peaceful future. So let us wage a global struggle against illiteracy, poverty, and terrorism. Let us pick up our books and our pens. They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world. Education is the only solution. Education first. Thank you.
Malala Yousafzai speaking at the United Nations General Assembly last July on her 16th birthday. Today, she became the youngest person ever to win a Nobel Prize. She shares the Peace Prize with Kailash Satyarthi, who's been a leader for decades in the international movement against child slavery and the exploitation of child workers. He developed Rugmark, now known as Good Weave, which is a monitoring, labeling, and certification system of rugs made in South Asia without child labor. The two will be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize on December 10th, International Human Rights Day in Oslo. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
Look, I want to make a nation proud. One day we'll say things loud and be free. With the power of speech, we can change our world and how it's perceived. We've got doubts and beliefs, but no one thing's truly out of our reach. Don't tell me the sky's the limit, cause nothing could pull me down when I dream. I'm working on turning them to a reality and opening eyes. And sharing a vision with every person who I chose to be blind. I wanna focus their minds and show that despite we're broken inside, because they're powerful together without a cloak or disguise. I hope in the future that I can look back on a new generation that's peaceful, that's grateful, they're equal. Cause those before me to change for the people with paints and an easel. We picture perfect, you are attention to making the most of our time, creating more than useless inventions. I'm only young, so I guess it's down for you to decide. Would you choose to fight for what you believe in? Would you do what is right if I needed you? Would you stand tall with me right here by my side? Be the change you want to see. Take a look through my eyes.
From Girls of the World to benefit the Malala Fund. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road broadcasting from Detroit, Michigan, from the studios of Detroit Public Television. In our next segment, we'll look at how Detroit has shut off water to thousands of residents who've fallen behind on payments. Some 350 to 400 customers reportedly continue to lose water service daily in Detroit. But first, we turn to Ferguson, Missouri, where activists are calling on people to join them this weekend for a national protest against police bias and violence against Black and Latino communities in the wake of the police shooting of the unarmed African-American teenager Michael Brown. Organizers have invited the Brown family to take part. Dr. Cornel West, Dr. Harry Belafonte are also among those expected to attend the events, which include a mass march and a planned act of civil disobedience. They'll join local activists who've been calling for the arrest of police officer Darren Wilson, who killed Mike Brown, for the appointment of a special prosecutor in the case and the firing of the Ferguson police chief, Thomas Jackson. This week, Democracy Now!'s Aaron Mate and I sat down with 3 of the organizers involved in the protests. Tef Poe is a St. Louis rapper and activist who recently wrote a column for Time magazine headlined, "Barack Obama has forsaken us, but we will not stop fighting injustice." We also spoke with Tori Russell, an organizer with Hands Up United, and Ashley Yates, an activist, poet, artist raised in Florissant, Missouri. She's a member and co-creator of Millennial Activists United. I began by asking Tef Poe to talk about what's happening this weekend.
What we're going to see this weekend is a massive show of force by peaceful demonstrators coming from all over the country, all over the world possibly, to Ferguson and greater St. Louis as a whole to stand in solidarity, to speak out against the injustices that happen with police brutality, not just with Michael Brown, but with several people, several different cases worldwide.
You were about to start a tour when Mike Brown was killed, is that right?
Yes, I was.
Where were you?
I was actually being a part of the Vatterott College tour, which ironically enough, Michael Brown was supposed to attend Vatterott College.
Where is Vatterott?
It's located in St. Louis in the Midwest region. It's a Midwest regional trade school, and I was going to help promote the music sector of the school on the tour. Did you
go there?
No, I did not.
Huh. So what happened then?
I went on one date of the tour. I went to Memphis, and I just didn't feel right leaving home with all that stuff going on, with so much commotion in the streets. So I just came back and canceled the rest of my dates.
And what did you do in Ferguson?
In Ferguson, I just got to the ground, to be honest with you. Initially, I didn't know what to do. I was a regular person who I have done some community organizing among some other issues, but nothing so directly attached to the police. And I just got on the ground. I met Tori Russell, I met Ashley, and other youth organizers, and we kind of just formed a united front and moved forward on different issues concerning this one.
Ashley, talk about the organizing in those first days after Mike Brown was killed.
Well, in the first days, I don't know if there really was a lot of organizing. This was a reactionary event. People were just, angry. We were tired. We had seen too many Black lives gunned down at the hands of police. So we just took to the streets to show our resistance to the system that had been working against us. As the weeks passed, then the organizing really started. And it was just pretty much people getting together with the people they had been on the front line with and saying, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? How can we move forward? And that's why we founded our organization, Millennial Activists United, just to kind of see what those next steps were to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So we focused around a civilian review board at first. We focused around police oversight by the community, whatever that would look like. We focused on removing the people that were in positions of power that had let us down and allowed this tragedy to happen.
Now, some of these demands have come up in the city council meetings that have been held since Michael Brown's killing. Can you talk about the response that you've been getting?
The response from the community is positive. I actually had a closed session meeting with some of the Ferguson officials, and there are definitely people behind the wall that want to make change, but it's a slow process. It's too slow for the organizers, so we're looking to find ways to kind of, punch some loopholes in that and make it move a little faster, because we know that this cannot happen again. So we have to make sure that whatever change is implemented is expedient.
Tori, can you talk about where you were on August 9th when Darren Wilson gunned down Mike Brown?
Well, I was at home, actually watching the Little League World Series. Was the Jackie Robinson team was playing, and everybody was tweeting about that. And then on my timeline, I seen a dead body. Surprisingly, I didn't react what you would, probably react to a dead body. I saw the stepfather.
Where do you live in relation?
I stay in North St. Louis, like 8 minutes away. Like my street I can connect to West Florissant and take that right to Canfield Drive. So I sat there for hours. I even saw the sign where Ferguson PD killed my unarmed son. And it took hours for me to actually move. So one of my best friends, Brother Al Sharif from the Nation of Islam, picked me up. We went to the site, saw Brother Shaheed, the family, you know, other people telling me that the father actually took a sheet out to the body because the body was uncovered. And the police wouldn't allow that. So I didn't know what to do, you know, but I went to the police department to try to get some answers. So I wouldn't say I was a born organizer, but I took people there, I tweeted it out, people followed. It started with one lady named Latoya Cash, Brother Montega Simmons for the Organization for Black Struggle, which I didn't know at the time. And it was just us, 8 people, and then it grew to about 100. So we went in, you know, tried to talk to Chief Jackson. He said he would meet with us. Then he drove off.
What do you mean?
So a local pastor, Pastor Johnson at Wells Springs, he kind of brokered a conversation to get some answers about the case on August 9th. It was about 9 o'clock because we've been out there about from 6 to 9. So at 9:30, I declared that I was going in, you know, no matter what. If they locked me up or whatever was going to happen was going to happen at 9:30. He kind of brokered the call. 9:45, he said he'd be out. 9:50, he drove off in his truck. About a little bit after 10, me and 5 other people went inside.
Which brings us to the police chief's apology. This is Police Chief Tom Jackson.
I want to say this to the Brown family. No one who has not experienced the loss of a child can understand what you're feeling. I'm truly sorry for the loss of your son. I'm also sorry that it took so long to remove Michael from the street. The time that it took involved very important work on the part of investigators who are trying to collect evidence and gain a true picture of what happened that day. But it was just too long, and I'm truly sorry for that.
So that was Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson. What's your response to that, Tori Russell? You were there when he drove off at the beginning.
Yeah, so like I said, I think that was day 50, you know, He took 50 days to acknowledge that it was a tragedy, right? As if he didn't know on August 9th that it was a tragedy. And then if he can come out on day 50, he could have came out on day 1. You know, just to acknowledge that it was an unarmed young man who was killed. A lot of people in the community are saying due process. He wasn't allowed his due process. No acknowledgement of the officer. You know, at first he said someone threw out name. What was it, Michael White? And then at the press conference they asked Darren Wilson, is that the officer's name? And he said no. You know, so how can I believe the apology after a timeline of lies? August 9th lie, you know, next week he brought out a lie. He brought out the video saying that it was a consent decree in the Sunshine Act, saying that people, the press was requesting this video. Which really has nothing to do with an indictment. You can't indict a dead person. You can't indict an officer sanctioned by the state who murdered a boy.
Tefpo, you wrote a piece against President Obama's response on this. I wanted to play what President Obama had to say at the Congressional Black Caucus.
I know that nothing any of us can say can ease the grief of losing a child so soon. But the anger and the emotion that followed his death awakened our nation once again to the reality that people in this room have long understood, which is in too many communities around the country, a gulf of mistrust exists between local residents and law enforcement. Too many young men of color feel targeted by law enforcement, guilty of walking while black or driving while black, judged by stereotypes that fuel fear and resentment and hopelessness. We know that statistically, in everything from enforcing drug policy to applying the death penalty to pulling people over, there are significant racial disparities. That's just the statistics. One recent poll showed that the majority of Americans think the criminal justice system doesn't treat people of all races equally. Think about that. That's not just blacks, not just Latinos or Asians or Native Americans saying things may not be fair. That's most Americans.
That's President Obama addressing the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Tefpo, your response. You wrote a piece in Time magazine called Barack Obama Has Forsaken Us, But We Will Not Stop Fighting Injustice.
Well, I mean, that speech sounds really good and it's really entertaining, but it didn't stop me and my comrades from being tear gassed. and that's the bottom line. I walked out to the West Florissant one night, and we were surrounded by National Guards with M16s aimed at unarmed civilians and unarmed media representatives. At that very moment, I realized that I could have died. And I looked to the sky and I said, God, I cannot continue to lead my people to the slaughter. We have voted for Barack Obama 2 times, and it still happened. A lot of us young people voted for him with the assumption that what happened during Hurricane Katrina wouldn't happen to black people during his watch. I don't have any outlandish fallacies about what the government can do, but I would realistically expect that if young, unarmed, peaceful, protesting black people are demonstrating our First Amendment right, that we won't be hurdled up like cattle and forced to defend ourselves. And that's the reality that we were facing in Ferguson. It felt as if no one cared about us.
Ashley, in the first few weeks, there was a huge media frenzy in Ferguson. When we were there was satellite trucks packed into that super mall on West Florissant. I recall seeing teams of CNN reporters accompanied by bodyguards. Now most of the media has left. Has the media attention helped, and how have local residents reacted to it?
Well, the reason I'm here, let's be honest, is because I took to Twitter. That first night we went to the police department, I did what a lot of people use Twitter for, and I just tweeted what was happening to me. So I think the media attention has helped, but in the process, we've really became our own media. I've had people come to me and say, you know, we go to Twitter for the real. We go to Twitter to see what's happening in Ferguson. Tef mentioned earlier the twist that they put on the protest where the police officer barreled through the protesters. If you were on Twitter, if you were on the live stream, you know that that is not the truth. So the media has helped amplify some of the truth, but they have also tried to hide some of it. But it's been circumvented by the real presence of Twitter activists such as myself.
There's a lot of talk that this moment in Ferguson has become sort of the ground zero for a national movement. How do you, as an activist there on the ground, take to that, take this perception that you're seen as being at the epicenter of a national struggle?
I think it's a wonderful, positive opportunity, and we're grasping it. We are tired. We're tired of seeing our black men get gunned down. We're tired of seeing our black women get gunned down, and particularly unarmed black people get gunned down to an excessive extent, 11 bullets, 21 bullets, 41 bullets. We are tired of it, and we know that it is not just happening in Ferguson. There's John Crawford in Dayton. There's Ezell Ford in L.A.
John Crawford is the man who was shot dead in a Walmart, holding a Walmart product.
Yes, yes. So we know it's not just isolated to Ferguson. We see all the other cases, and we've made grand efforts to get out to those cities and connect with those people to let people know that this is not just a Ferguson issue. It's a nationwide issue of police brutality that has to stop.
Ashley, can you read your T-shirt?
Sure. We've got Emmett Till, Amadou Diallo. We've got Sean Bell, Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin. We've got Jordan, Eric Garner. Thank you, Jordan Davis, Eric Garner, Mike Brown, and Ezell Ford. And then if you look at the very bottom, it's to be continued. We want to put a period at the end of that. That is our goal.
So tell us what's happening this weekend, Tef. What are the plans in Ferguson?
Well, we have a series of very creative and very coordinated actions. I think what happened initially, as you heard Ashley speak on earlier, when this incident first happened, we didn't know what to do. We were kind of playing catch up. So with the Weekend of Resistance, we have the opportunity to show the world that we actually are organized, that we actually are on one accord, that we actually are synchronized. We are going to have a few massive demonstrations downtown, and then some of those people are going to break off into their own private engagements and private demonstrations in different public settings. And we're going to have a concert on Sunday, I believe, like a block party style concert. We're going to use that to try to politicize a lot of young people and maybe register people to vote, connect people with different organizations that can cater to their different issues and things that they're concerned about. It's just going to be a massive opportunity to really engage a large amount of people and also connect with people that feel what we're going through.
I know John Crawford is a major issue for you, Tef. John Crawford, who was gunned down in the Ohio Walmart holding a BB gun that was from the shelf.
Right.
Now, The officers were not indicted who killed him. The reason, they said, is because they were afraid, and it's based on their perception that they got a 911 call, and so they went in armed, ready to kill. What about this idea that police officers are afraid?
You know, I told a police officer the other day while we were protesting, you have the guns and we don't. So the notion that you are afraid of us when you have all of the weapons in the world is ridiculous. You can bring a tank, you can bring an armored vehicle, you can bring tear gas, smoke bombs, you can bring assault rifles. All I have is this. It makes 0 sense.
For our radio listeners.
My hands are in the air. It makes 0 sense. It's illogical. But that shows you the ridiculous nature of racism, because it's the idea that when these young men and these young women are attacked, suddenly they turn into Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, Superman, Spider-Man, and Wonder Woman. And I guess John Crawford could have killed that officer with laser vision, supposedly. So it's just ridiculous, you know. And when you watch the video, it's even more ridiculous that they weren't punished. Punishment, I believe, wasn't even considered. And that's the ridiculous nature of the beast.
A lot of the protests have been on Florissant, and you're actually from Florissant, next door to Ferguson.
Yes, ma'am.
Dred Scott is buried at the Calvary Cemetery in Florissant, and right down the road from Ferguson. Dred Scott was considered the worst Supreme Court decision ever, the decision that said an African-American, slave or free, cannot be a citizen of the United States. As we wrap up, your thoughts on where we have come.
Well, I think we're seeing that in action, right? We're not that far removed from it. Like Tori talked about, the fact that they can just shoot down black people at will and then backtrack and become the jury and find information, whether it be true or untrue, to justify that murder. We saw it in the release of the tape with Mike Brown. That had absolutely nothing to do with it. Darren Wilson was responding on an entirely different call when he encountered Mike Brown. So we're definitely seeing, as Steph talked about, the ridiculous nature of racism, and we have to work on that. We have to recognize it within our communities. And once we start realizing that we really are being weaponized, like our black skin is being weaponized, people are seeing our melanin as a threat, then we can move forward. And that's what we're really working with the Weekend of Resistance, is moving forward, showing people that they are not alone. I went to Dayton, spoke with the Ohio Student Association, who's doing a lot of the work around the John Crawford case. They've been a great help in just building with other communities that see the same issue, that have had the same problem, and we can move forward from there, change the perception. Right? Change the perception of what it means to be young and black, and I think that's what all of us are doing here. We're young, black, we're motivated, we're organized. We are not threats simply because of the color of our skin.
Tori Russell, last comment.
The Dred Scott case is the key part of October 11th. We're going to meet downtown. We're going to go by that site. We're going to go to the courthouse, and that's about, what, 140 years removed. And we're still at that date in history.
1857.
Yeah, so I mean that's. I mean that's what, 150, 160. We're about that time, and we're still at Mike Brown, and we're still at Dred Scott. I don't know what year it is. When I'm in St. Louis, I don't know. And weeks of tear gas, like I said, I don't feel so American after getting tear gas. You know, and Eric Holder stepping down after he walked in and said that he wanted to have this race dialogue. Here it is, he steps down. We had the meetings with the Department of Justice. They said all they can do is sue, and they don't sue for money, they sue for recommendations. So, I mean, that's why this Weekend of Resistance is key. So people can know what's going on, what we had, and in 50 to 60 days, you can go home and organize. You can be just like me, coming from off the couch, off of Twitter, 60 days later, running a protest, shutting down economies and marching and organizing people in the streets.
Finally, Tefbo.
You know, the thing that I'm big on is showing the infrastructure of the police and other racist institutions that we are not scared. For so long, fear is the reason that people like ourselves have not got off the couch. Last night I had a show in St. Louis, and they surrounded the venue with about 50+ police officers. They had undercover police officers inside of the show. I've done over 100.
This was Sunday night?
Yeah, last night, Sunday night. I've had over 100 shows at this venue. It's a place where my talent was groomed at. And they even went to the owner on Thursday and asked him to cancel the show. So this is a mechanism of fear. They're hoping that this is a way that will make people like myself and other young people that are following our lead say, you know what, maybe we're doing too much. Maybe we need to stop. But the message that we're sending to the system is that we're not going to stop. We are resilient. I told a police officer once, you can only do two things to me. You can kill me, or you can lock me up. Once you get past being scared of either one of those options, a brand new world opens up.
5 seconds.
That was Tef Poe, a St. Louis rapper and activist, Tori Russell, an organizer with Hands Up United, as well as Ashley Yates, an activist, poet, artist, and co-creator of Millennial Activists United. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.
Two-thirds a person, rapings and beatings and suffering that worsens. Black human packages tied up in strings. Black rage can come from all these kinds of things. Black rage is founded on blatant denial, squeezed economics, subsistence survival, deafening silence and social control. Black rage is founded on wounds in the soul. When the dogs bite, when the beatings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember all these kinds of things, and then I don't fear so bad. Black rage is founded.
Lauryn Hill performing a sketch of Black Rage. She posted it online Thursday in response to the Ferguson protests. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in Detroit, broadcasting from Detroit Public Television. We're broadcasting from the Great Lakes state of Michigan. The state has one of the longest freshwater coastlines in the country, but its residents are increasingly concerned about their access to affordable water. A judge overseeing Detroit's bankruptcy recently ruled the city can continue shutting off water to residents who've fallen behind on payments. Judge Stephen Rhodes ruled there is no enforceable right to water. Detroit began cutting off water to thousands of households several months ago, prompting protests from residents and from the United Nations. Today, some 350 to 400 customers reportedly continue to lose water service daily in Detroit. Detroit's Water Authority carries an estimated $5 billion in debt and has been the subject of talks to privatize. Activists have been organizing against the water shutoff, saying they target Detroit's most vulnerable families.
I want to tell you what 6 kids on this porch when they came to shut off the water, and their parents had to run to try to find how they're going to pay their water bill. Another woman, she's pregnant, she has a 2-year-old. She's holding the bill for $400 in her hand, and she's begging the man, don't turn off my water. A pregnant woman with a $400 bill. You're going to close the water off for a woman with a $400 bill who's pregnant and a 2-year-old.
One of the many Detroit residents protesting the recent water shutoffs. The poverty rate in Detroit is approximately 40%, and people have seen their water bills increase by 119% within the last decade. Most of the residents are African American. 2/3 of those impacted by the water shutoffs involve families with children. Well, for more, we're joined now by Alice Jennings, the lead attorney for Detroit residents fighting against the city's controversial campaign to turn off water service for unpaid accounts. Alice Jennings, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you.
To explain what is happening.
Well, what's happening here is nothing short of a humanitarian crisis. Starting last year, the city of Detroit began to shut water off on homes, and these would be homes with disabled persons, children. It really didn't matter. In a military way, the truck would start at one end of the street, and by the time it reached the other end, there may be 50% of the homes were shut off.
Was there any advance notice?
No, there was not. Only the policy and procedure where they would put on the bill, your water may be subject to shut off. But there had been a process where water was not collected on. So people grew very accustomed to paying some part of their bill, a little here, a little there, maybe buying food, getting medical care. And so when this happened, it was sudden and abrupt, very abrupt.
And so if your water was about to be turned off, you'd presumably try to fill everything you can with water, but you don't have that chance.
There wasn't even that chance. In fact, the late Charity Hicks was arrested in her neighborhood, a true water warrior and food justice warrior. She was arrested when she tried to have the folks who were cutting the water off to just stop for a few minutes so her pregnant neighbor could get water from some of the neighbors who had water, and they wouldn't. So she was taken to jail and arrested.
The Detroit Water and Sewerage Department has defended its actions, saying the water shutoffs are necessary for alleviating the department's debts. This is Greg Eno, the public affairs specialist at DWSD.
Yes, and just to state to that.
Let's put it that way, to try to get.
Can you explain what it is that they're saying?
Yes. We filed our constitutional lawsuit based on the fact that the Equal Protection Clause should cause both commercial accounts as well as individuals to be treated the same. In this instance, some of the commercial accounts owed millions of dollars, while the families may have only owed $150. And so part of the claim is that the treatment is different, and there wasn't a chance for families to get the help they needed to avoid the shutoff. And certainly where community children and seniors are involved, that should always be the goal.
Let's go back to what the sewer department is saying.
We're trying to work with people more aggressively, let's put it that way, to try to get them either on payment plans or to get them paid. And it has worked. It has, we've increased our, we've lowered our debt a little bit by doing that.
That was Greg Eno, your response.
And my response would be to Greg Eno that there's not any differentials being made as to whether or not there's a family who doesn't have the resources to pay for the water. And in fact, there is a policy and practice now in existence, just in the last month or so, to try to make some determination as whether there's the ability to pay or affordability. But at the time we filed the lawsuit, nothing was being done, and so the shutoffs just occurred.
So who are you representing?
We are representing 10 individuals who have stood up, who all of them have either had their water shut off, about 8 of them, and 2 who were very close to being shut off because the landlord didn't pay the bill. Then we're representing the Michigan Welfare Rights, the People's Water Board, Moratorium Now, as well as the Michigan chapter of the National Action Network.
Isn't this also a matter of hygiene, of how you deal with keeping clean? What about the kind of infections we're dealing with today?
It is so much a safety issue. In fact, the director of the Wayne County Health Department just recently proclaimed that there is a medical emergency in the city of Detroit because of the shutoffs. With poor sanitation comes all types of medical conditions. There is the ability to become dehydrated, particularly with children and senior citizens. There is an issue of contamination, going from neighbor to neighbor to get water, and taking different kind of germs and sanitation issues. And we're afraid, frankly.
The issue of the enterovirus?
The enterovirus 68 has reached Michigan just last week.
That has killed children in Denver and New Jersey.
That's correct. I mean, this is Judge Rhodes, even as he ruled against us, acknowledged that the irreparable harm to children and families could occur by his ruling if there wasn't a water restoration to these homes. But because of money and the need to have revenue, he decided on the side of money instead of on the side of health and safety and on the side of the people.
The UN and international water activists weighing in, has that had an effect?
Well, we're hoping for sure that it will. Next Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, the UN, two of the rapporteurs will be here. Ms. Leilani Farha, who is the UN delegate for housing, as well as Katrina Albuquerque, who is water and sanitation. They will do fact-finding. There will be a public hearing. There will be a meeting with the mayor. There will be a meeting with the legal team as well.
I wanted to finally switch gears a bit and ask you about Grace Lee Boggs.
Yes.
She stated recently on her Facebook page, "I'm coming to the end of a long journey, a journey that began over 70 years ago at the beginning of World War II. Grace is now 99 years old. She is the well-known activist, author, philosopher based in Detroit. And as she has dealt in her life with grace, I think you could say, like her first name,
yes,
she is talking about transitioning now."
Yes, and with the same bravery that she stood and marched in front of drug houses and organized labor movements, and it's very difficult for us who are very close to her, but she's taken it on.
You're in charge of her care?
I am one of the two people. Shay Howe is also her other trustee, and we're just trying to love her and make her as comfortable as we can. But she's still saying, what time is it on the clock of the world? And we're accountable to make sure we continue the type of work she and James Boggs.
I wanted to go to a clip of Grace Lee Boggs talking about Detroit.
From New York, where I had lived a good deal of my life and where I went to school, to Detroit, because I thought that the working class in Detroit was going to rise up and restore, reconstruct the city. And I arrived at a time when the population was beginning to decline, when the working class was shrinking, and I had to begin learning from what was taking place. And that learning process is something that a lot of people are undergoing. And I think it's very difficult for someone who doesn't live in Detroit to say you can look at a vacant lot and instead of seeing devastation, see hope. See the opportunity to grow your own food, see an opportunity to give young people a sense of process that's very difficult to get in the city. That the vacant lot represents the possibilities for a cultural revolution. It's amazing how few Americans understand that, even though I think filmmakers and writers are coming to the city and trying to spread the word.
Grace Lee Boggs took a fall last month, and she's in hospice care at home. Rarely do you talk about someone as directly saying they're dying, but Grace is acknowledging this.
She is, and in the face of it, trying to let us know what's going on and what it's like, and we're just there with her and loving her up.
Well, Alice Jennings, I want to thank you for being with us. Lead attorney for Detroit residents fighting against the city's controversial campaign to turn water service off for unpaid accounts. Also on the board of the James and Grace Lee Boggs School and a close friend of Grace Lee Boggs. That does it for the show. I'll be speaking at the Lensick Theater in Santa Fe, New Mexico tonight. I'm Amy Goodman, broadcasting from Detroit.